Hello everyone, I'm Chris, and this is everything you need to know before watching A Quiet Place Day 1, releasing June 28th. If you end up enjoying this video and want to see more from us, then make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to know anytime we upload a new video. An original story conceptualized by screenwriters Scott Beck and Bryan, A Quiet Place offered a unique form of storytelling that resulted in it becoming one of the biggest horror movies of all time, along with its sequel, A Quiet Place Part 2. With each of the two films ranking in the top 15 highest grossing horror movies ever at the worldwide box office, as well as being the highest grossing horror films of 2018 and 2021 respectively. So, the franchise will now look to recreate that success with its new film, A Quiet Place Day 1, which will actually star a completely new cast of characters as they navigate their way through the beginning of the apocalypse. But before the new film, we still think it'll be helpful to know everything that's gone down in the world of A Quiet Place so far. To begin, we have to go back to June 2020, in the midst of a boy named Marcus Abbott's Little League baseball game, where we also meet the rest of his family, including his father Lee, mother Evelyn, younger brother Bo, and deaf sister Reagan, as well as the family's friend and neighbor Emmett. Just as Marcus gets up to bat though, the game's suddenly interrupted by an unidentifiable object in the distance hurtling down towards the town, which results in the game being abruptly ended so that everyone can return home to presumed safety. Since each parent had brought their own car, Evelyn begins making her way back home with Marcus and Bo in her station wagon, while Lee takes Reagan in his truck. Although, just before Lee heads off, he sees a friend of his, Officer Ronnie, arriving at the scene, and so he asks him if he knows anything about what's going on. A question that's almost immediately followed by the sudden arrival of an alien creature smashing into Ronnie's squad car, prompting Lee to make a beeline for his truck and drive off. Evelyn, meanwhile, is stuck in traffic with the boys when they also encounter one of these creatures, witnessing it attack the car ahead of them, prompting her to quickly put her vehicle in reverse in hopes of avoiding the same fate, which eventually results in her crashing. Although seeing the collision from afar, Reagan and Lee are unable to offer their family any help at this moment, as the creature's pursuit forces them to hide inside a local store along with several other civilians, until someone's ringtone draws the creature's attention once again, who jumps inside the building and begins killing anyone it can get their hands on, which fortunately doesn't include Reagan and Lee, as they manage to escape while the creature's attention is instead turned on to Ronnie, who opens fire at it with his shotgun before ultimately being killed as well. We then jump ahead 88 days later, over which we see that the Abbott family are somehow still alive, as they're seen now raiding an abandoned store for supplies and communicating only through sign language as to not attract the creatures. As the family prepares to leave, however, Bo approaches them with a toy rocket, which a frightened Lee quickly and quietly takes from him to remove its batteries, explaining that the toy is too loud and so they must leave without it. While their parents aren't looking though, Reagan decides to give the rocket back to Bo, although without the batteries. But following her subsequent exit, Bo discreetly grabs the batteries and puts them back in the rocket himself. The family then begins their journey home, walking barefoot along a sand trail, until they're brought to a sudden stop upon hearing the noise coming from Bo's rocket, prompting Lee to sprint towards him in hopes of reaching him before the creatures do. But in the end, he's too late, and Bo is killed instantly. Jumping ahead again now, another 384 days into the Abbott family's farm, where each of the 4 remaining members continue to survive. Although that may soon become more difficult since it's revealed that they're expecting the birth of a new addition to their family in just under 3 weeks, as Evelyn is pregnant. Sometime over the last year plus, Lee's managed to install a surveillance system around the farm, which he uses to monitor and take notes on the deadly alien creatures, learning they're blind, attack sound, and have some kind of protective armor, as well as that there are 3 of these creatures in their vicinity. In addition, Lee's attempted to get in contact with others over the radio, signaling SOS in Morse code every night, to which he's yet to get a response. But he does know there's still a few people out there, as every night, he also goes to the top of one of the silos and sets a fire to signal the other nearby residents, who in turn do the same. Lee has also taken the time to create a cochlear implant for Reagan, forged from a radio amplifier, but she refuses to test it, insisting that it won't work, since all his other attempts have failed in the past. Still, he places the cochlear implant in her hand before heading off to take Marcus hunting. Marcus doesn't want to go though, fearing they may encounter monsters, so Reagan offers to go instead, but Lee insists she must stay home and help her mother, prompting her to storm off to her room where she decides to test the hearing aid, which as expected doesn't work. Along with her frustrations with the current state of the world and her life, Reagan's also left feeling immense guilt over Bo's death, which she believes her father blames on her. So she decides to head off on her own to the bridge where her brother was killed, and to the memorial the family had created for him, to which she also brings Bo's rocket, so she could place it at his grave. Meanwhile, Lee and Marcus have made it to the river, where Lee's installed homemade fish nets to catch food, but he loses control of the fish and it flips into the water, scaring Marcus, who believes the noise will attract the creatures. But Lee's able to calm him down by explaining that any sound is safe as long as another sound nearby is louder. And to prove this, he takes Marcus just beneath the waterfall and shouts loudly, convincing him that they're perfectly safe. Back at the house meanwhile, Evelyn, after doing some laundry and hanging up their clothes, decides to head up to Beau's room for a moment, which brings her to tears, before the family's mostly normal day, or at least normal for the state of this world, is soon made complicated, as Evelyn's water suddenly breaks, forcing her to quickly and quietly head down to the basement. But while making her way down the steps, she inadvertently steps right onto an exposed nail, which she'd actually unknowingly exposed earlier while bringing up the laundry, and which causes her to drop a framed photograph she'd grabbed while in Beau's room, drawing the attention of the nearby creatures. So after painfully pulling her foot off the nail, she signals an emergency to the others by changing the house's exterior lights to red, just before realizing a creature has already entered the home. In an attempt to avoid it and escape, Evelyn sets off a mechanical kitchen timer. But although this works in distracting it and allows her to head back upstairs, she's again stopped from escaping the home by yet another creature stood outside, leading her to instead flee upstairs and into the bathroom, as her contractions get stronger and stronger, ultimately forcing her into the tub in hopes she can silently push through the pain. Quickly though, the pain becomes too much, and she can't help but let out a scream of anguish. But fortunately, the creatures are lured away that exact moment by Lee and Marcus setting off some fireworks, which also allows Lee to make his way back into the house armed with a shotgun. And there he finds Evelyn, thankfully still alive after having successfully birthed their newborn child. He then carries the two out of the home and over to their barn, underneath which they've managed to make the basement soundproof, allowing Evelyn some time to rest after Lee places the baby inside of its own soundproof wooden crate with an oxygen tank to help it breathe. Upon awakening from her brief rest, Evelyn immediately begins to worry about their children's whereabouts, which in turn makes her think back to the day they lost Beau, expressing all the guilt she's carried since, specifically stemming from her not carrying him back home herself that day to ensure he was safe. And so she makes Lee promise that he'll protect them, before he then returns to the surface to begin his search for their children, who throughout this had eventually found each other within the cornfields and decided to make their way to the top of the silo, hoping that the fire would catch their father's attention, although this plan quickly fails after they run out of lighter fluid and the fire dies. Back beneath the barn meanwhile, Evelyn once again awakens, only to find the room has begun flooding due to a busted water pipe, as well as their newborn floating within the water. So she picks their child up, before then immediately encountering a creature as it rises from beneath the water. In hopes of avoiding it, she slowly backs away into a corner directly behind the source of the flood, and before the baby's coos can give up their location, the creature's attention is again suddenly turned elsewhere, this time to the sound of Marcus suddenly falling through the trap doors atop the grain-filled silo, one of which ends up falling along with him. The sound of his fall is overheard by Lee, who fortunately had just arrived close by, but he's unable to offer his son any help at the moment, who slowly begins sinking into the grains like quicksand, prompting Reagan to jump down into the silo with him to try and help him get on top of the fallen door. Although in the process, she also begins sinking, but Marcus ultimately manages to pull her up onto the door with him. They aren't given much time to feel any sort of relief though, as the creature then suddenly jumps down alongside and attempts an attack against them, which they manage to thwart by using the door to block the blow, before the creature then appears to become disoriented as Reagan's hearing aid produces a high-pitched frequency, causing pain to the both of them that luckily scares the creature away. Reagan and Marcus then escape the silo and are finally reunited with Lee, who, with the creature still out there, has the kids enter a nearby truck while he grabs hold of an axe from the tool shed, which is almost immediately rendered useless when the creature suddenly appears and sends him flying with a slash across his chest, before it then turns its attention onto the kids, resulting in Reagan's hearing aid producing that same high-pitched frequency, although this time she's unable to bear the pain and decides to turn it off, allowing the creature to attack the truck. Just when it appears it may kill them though, Lee rises to his feet with the axe in hand, although he quickly chooses to drop the weapon, and instead expresses his love for his daughter through sign language, before letting out a loud scream and sacrificing himself to draw the creature away from the car, enabling his kids to drive back home where they're able to reunite and share a tearful embrace with their mother. It isn't long before the three are once again forced into hiding though by the sounds of a creature nearby, which continues pursuing them as they make their way down into the basement, with the kids hiding behind Evelyn as she aims her shotgun. But as the creature begins slowly approaching, Reagan has a sudden realization after seeing her father's notes on the wall, questioning what is the weakness. which prompts her to turn her hearing aid back on, causing harm to both herself and the creature, before then placing it onto a nearby microphone, amplifying the sound and causing the creature to collapse from the pain. It does soon rise to its feet once again, but noticeably injured, with the flesh beneath its armored head exposed, and in this vulnerable state, Evelyn's able to kill it with a shotgun blast. This blast, though, draws the attention of even more creatures, so the three prepare to leave before they arrive, with Evelyn heading back to the now nearly destroyed barn and grabbing an air tank in the baby's crate, and Reagan grabbing a large speaker and her father's map from the basement, which indicates the last known locations of human life. Reagan then heads to the top of the silo and lights the flame once again, in hopes of a response from one of the residences nearby, which she fortunately gets when a single fire peers over the mountain. So, the three travel for miles beyond their sand trail in hopes they can find refuge with whomever lit the flame, but upon reaching their destination, revealed to be an old abandoned rail yard, Evelyn inadvertently trips a booby trap that results in some glass bottles clanging, in turn signaling creatures nearby, so they're forced to run, and as they do, Marcus also steps into a bear trap, causing him to let out a scream at the top of his lungs, drawing a creature to their exact location, which Evelyn and Reagan, as they'd done before, are ultimately able to kill using Reagan's hearing aid and a shotgun blast, before freeing Marcus and running inside the building. There they're met by a man who shows them that a creature still follows, so he carries Marcus over his shoulder and leads the two women to the basement, where they all take shelter inside a steel, soundproof bunker. However, they only have so much air inside, so the man has a timer set to determine how long they can stay hidden. Although helping them with their current predicament, the man claims there aren't enough supplies for him to help them any further. But as he speaks, Evelyn recognizes his voice to be that of their former friend and neighbor Emmett, to whom she shows her baby and pleads for his help. As Marcus rests, listening to the radio with headphones placed on him by Reagan, Emmett reveals how his life shaped out since the apocalypse began, revealing his family is dead, with his sons dying the first day and his wife Nora dying 11 weeks ago from an illness, and he laments at the fact that he couldn't do enough to save her. Emmett also reveals that he'd actually known the flame he saw every night was Lee, but he'd never thought to come for them, claiming people have changed since it all began. Marcus over the radio, meanwhile, suddenly begins hearing the song Beyond the Sea, and Emmett reveals that it's been playing on repeat for the last 4 months, although it can only be heard from the valley, hence why the Abbotts hadn't heard it yet. This gives the three hope that there's still people out there, but Emmett insists there's nothing left, and claims he wants them gone tomorrow. During the night though, Reagan wakes up Marcus and heads with him into the bunker, where she explains that the song on the radio isn't just a song but a signal, as she looked up the radio station the song was coming from and found it's on an island beyond the sea. So she plans to follow the train tracks and find a boat that she can then take to the island so she can blast her hearing aid over the radio to help others. Marcus doesn't like this idea at all, believing she might just end up suffering the same fate as their father. But still, she decides to go off on her own as everyone else sleeps. Upon realizing Reagan's left, Evelyn rushes to Emmett and begs him to find her, claiming she's a person worth saving, and Emmett, although hesitant, ultimately agrees. Reagan, meanwhile, has made her way to the train station, where she finds a stalled train, in which she also uncovers a first aid kit, although she makes a bit of noise while retrieving it, attracting a nearby creature that nearly attacks her, but she's able to thwart it using the feedback from her hearing aid before shooting it with her shotgun, which unfortunately only grazes the creature. But luckily, before it can harm her, Emmett arrives and shoots it in the head. The two then run off and take cover within the building, in which Emmett attempts to convince her to go back with him, but she instead attempts to convince him to join her on her journey to the island, reiterating his claim that he couldn't do enough to save his wife from earlier, and claiming that now he can do so to save others. And so, with this newfound hope, he agrees to go with her. Back to the basement with Evelyn and Marcus now, where we see the baby's oxygen tank is almost out of air. So despite Marcus pleading for her not to leave, Evelyn heads off to the pharmacy to hopefully find some medical supplies. Although, on her way to there, she briefly stops at Beau's grave to place her wedding ring at it in honor of her late husband. Sometime later, we see Marcus lays the baby to rest and places him in the box, unaware that the tank is nearly out of air, so he can head up to the surface and look around the factory, during which he finds where Emmett sleeps, and inside the room, the body of Emmett's deceased wife, startling him and causing him to knock over some equipment, which attracts a creature nearby. So he quickly heads back down into the basement, and with the creature still following, he rushes inside the bunker. Although while doing so, he accidentally locks himself and his baby brother inside. It isn't long before Marcus finds himself unable to breathe due to the bunker running out of air, so upon realizing he's trapped, he's forced to share his brother's nearly empty oxygen tank. Fortunately, not for too long though, as Evelyn soon returns with medication and 2 tanks of oxygen before noticing the creature inside. So to draw it out of the basement, she fires a shot in the air, and once it's returned to the surface, she then shoots one of the oxygen tanks to set the creature on fire, which although not killing it, does set off sprinklers that allow Evelyn to head back down to the basement and regroup with her sons in the bunker. Throughout all this, Reagan and Emmett have made it to the marina, but before they can find a boat to travel on, they come across a little girl alone on the dock, who Emmett approaches believing she's in need of help, but the girl then suddenly grabs him and ties a noose connected to a bunch of bells around his neck, making him unable to move, while a group of dirty men then arrive and surround Reagan, with one even ripping off her shirt before attempting to take her away. But before they can, Emmett signs to Reagan for her to dive, which he'd actually learned how to sign from her all the way back during Marcus's previously mentioned baseball game. And once she does, Emmett attacks one of the men with the neck connected to his noose, resulting in the man dropping his lantern, which starts a fire, while the noise from the noose's bells draws a nearby creature that Emmett lures straight towards them by forcing a painful scream out of the man with a stab to his leg, before then jumping into the water while the creature kills him and the rest of his group. The creature then also attempts to attack Emmett after hearing him swimming, but luckily, it turns out that these aliens can't swim, so it instead drowns before Reagan arrives on a boat to pull Emmett up. So the two are finally able to travel across the seas into the island, where Emmett's shocked to find an actual community of people enjoying life with almost no restrictions. There, Emmett's soon greeted by a man named Henry, who reveals that the day it all began, he and his family were in the city when they heard the hurricane sirens. But once people learned the creatures couldn't swim, the National Guard started loading as many people as they could onto boats. Although sadly, only 2 of the 12 boats that were lined up got out. He then asks why Emmett made the trip here, and Emmett claims it was out of necessity to help, and he shows him Reagan's implant. Before the 3 can move ahead with their planned use of the hearing aid though, Emmett hears a sudden loud crashing noise by the beach, soon revealed to be coming from a boat from the dock earlier, that was last seen floating away with the creature on board. So he rushes back to the community and shouts for them to get inside, but sadly it's already too late, as the creature suddenly appears and begins killing everyone it can get its hands on. After helping hide some civilians and children, Emmett, Henry, and Reagan manage to lure the creature away from the town by driving off to the island's radio station. But although they're able to make it inside ahead of the creature, Henry's hesitant to continue pushing forward due to worries that the creature may have gone back for his family, allowing the alien to snatch him away, and he's presumably killed while Emmett and Reagan run off to the station's main office. Back within the bunker, Evelyn and Marcus, still waiting for the creature to leave, and now once again low on oxygen, are ultimately forced to open the bunker up so that Evelyn can grab her supplies. But she's quickly overheard by the alien still inside the basement, which chases her into and prevents her from closing the bunker, as well as slashes her leg. But luckily, just then, Reagan manages to reach the microphone in the radio station and blast her hearing aid over the radio, disorienting both the creature chasing her and Emmett, as well as the one attacking Marcus and Evelyn. And so, with the creatures now at their mercy, each of the kids grab a weapon, with Reagan grabbing a lead pipe and Marcus grabbing a gun, which they then use to simultaneously kill the 2 aliens. And that was everything you needed to know before A Quiet Place Day 1. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful in any way, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And also, let us know in the comments below which Quiet Place film is your favorite, and where the films rank amongst your favorite horror movies of all time. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.